So today what we are looking at is when you are given some information, how can you tell whether or not your lines are parallel, perpendicular, or in some cases neither? This is something that you may have seen already in an algebra class. To be honest, I don't know if it was something that was covered at the end of last year or not. So we're just gonna pretend like you don't know anything, okay? So first off, when you look at parallel lines, if you're looking at the slope, parallel lines have the same slope. Okay. Perpendicular lines, they have opposite reciprocal slopes. So let's talk about that for just 1 second. If they are the same slope, they have to be exactly the same. They have to be the same number, they have to be the same sign, it has to be the exact same. For the opposite reciprocals, remember, opposite just means that you are going to change the sign. So if it was once positive, it becomes negative, or vice versa. And then the reciprocal means that you are flipping the fraction. So if you have a fraction, you are flipping the top and bottom. So for example, like 2/3 would become 3/2, or 1/4 would become 4 because it's 4/1. So a reciprocal, you are just flipping that fraction. So notice here on the left-hand side, I changed your notes slightly. I want you to cross off this negative. I want you to write in the word opposite instead, because you are changing the sign. It's not always negative, you are just changing the sign. So if it was positive, it becomes negative. If it was negative, it becomes positive. So some examples would be 3/4, the reciprocal part would make it 4/3, but then since it's positive, we're going to change that to a negative. 2, anytime you have a whole number, think of it as being over 1. So therefore, we are going to change that to 1/2. And again, since it starts as positive, your opposite reciprocal would be negative. Negative 7/8 becomes positive 8/7. 1, again, put that over a 1. And when you flip that, it still becomes 1, but it's going to become a -1 because of that opposite piece. Now, number 5 is a little bit tricky because if you're thinking about slope, if it has a slope of 0, that's going to be a horizontal line. Okay? So the line that's perpendicular to that is a vertical line. And that vertical line is going to be undefined. Okay? Another way to think of that is if we put 0/1 and we flip it, it becomes 1/0. And you cannot have a fraction that has 0 as the denominator, so that is why your answer then becomes undefined. Okay, so what we're going to look at is we're going to practice using some slope, like the stuff that you guys have already done previously. And we're going to look at the slopes and then compare them. So first off, if we're doing A and B, we're going to subtract our y's. So it becomes 6 minus 3 over, and since I started with 6, I have to start with 2, and then 2 minus a -2. Just be careful of our signs. Make sure when you subtract a negative, it does turn into addition, so that becomes 3/4. All right? And then our slope of CD. Again, I'm going to do 3 minus 0, and since I started with the 3 on top, I have to start with that same point on bottom, and then that becomes 3/4 also. And so since both of those are the same, those lines are parallel. Okay? Moving on to example number 2. Again, what we're going to look at is we're going to split this up. We're going to look at line AB. So 4 minus 2. And since I started with the 4, I have to start with the 5 on the bottom. So 5 minus 0, that becomes 2/5. And then for CD, I'm going to start with this one. It doesn't matter which one you start with as long as you're consistent. That's just a reminder. So since I started with 8, I'm going to start with the 1 on top. So that becomes 5/-2. Now, one thing to be mindful of, I would not, if I were you, I would not change that to a decimal because it's a lot easier to see that opposite reciprocal in fraction forms. So notice they are flipped, the signs are also different, and so those lines are perpendicular. When you look at AB, again, I'm going to do my y's on top, so 2 minus a -12 on top, and since I start with 2 on top, I'm going to start with that same point on bottom. So that becomes 14 over, and then this one, -2 plus 9 turns into a 7. Now, one thing to note as well is you want to simplify. So I'm going to put this kind of as an asterisk. You want to simplify before you compare. Okay? So 14/7 becomes 2. For CD, I'm going to have 6 minus a negative 2. Since I started with the 6, I have to start with the negative 1. So that becomes 8 over 4. And again, we need to simplify. And so when we simplify, we do get 2. Therefore, those lines are parallel. So you definitely want to simplify before you compare. So take a minute, try out number 4. I'm going to let you guys try that one out, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so when we look at this, we have 8 minus 6. Again, you could have it flip-flop, that's fine. But whatever you start with on top, you have to start with the same thing on bottom. So that becomes 2 over negative 3, which is negative 2/3. For CV, we get 3 minus 2. And again, since I start with 3, I have to start with the same point on the bottom. So that becomes 1 over 4, which there is no connection there. So this is neither parallel nor perpendicular. Okay, so I'm going to have you do number 5 completely on your own. We're not even going to go over it. So I'm going to pause the video and let you do number 5. Okay, so in the past, these questions have come up. And so what if you have the same number, but one is opposite and one is negative? So example 3 and negative 3, or 1/3 and negative 1/3. If that's the case, they are going to be neither parallel nor perpendicular. The only exception is 1 and negative 1, because those technically are reciprocals. So be careful of the 1 and negative 1. For the second piece, reciprocals but the same sign. So for example, 2/3 and 3/2. That doesn't fit in either category. They're not exactly the same, and they're not opposite reciprocals. So again, this one would be neither. So it's close, but not close enough. What I would definitely suggest, though, is if you come up with either of those situations, I would just double check your work really briefly to make sure that you did slope correctly and that you didn't miss a sign someplace in there. Okay? All right, now here's the thing. If you look at the next piece, this is just a quick review of vertical lines and horizontal lines. If you notice, the next couple examples, we're going to be looking at equations. So just as a reminder, vertical lines, okay? If you look at this, we have a vertical line going through here, and I'm going to outline this because it's not overly clear where that line is going. But the key is, it is crossing your x-intercept. So I'm going to put crosses the x-intercept. And if it crosses that x-intercept, your equation is going to be x equals. Now, in this case, your x equals that x-intercept. So notice it says x equals a, where a represents the x-intercept. So here, that value is -1, so our equation is x equals -1. On the flip side, if it is horizontal, okay, again, I'm going to outline that, we now have the line going through your y-axis at a value of 3. So if it's the y-axis, it's y equals, and again, you're going to use that intercept of 3. So notice a represents the y-intercept. Okay, so think about these. Don't just try to memorize them. Think about them logically. And here's the deal. When you're looking at comparing equations, we're not going to do all of these because, again, I think that you spent a significant amount of time in algebra talking about lines and their equations. So we're not going to spend a ton of time here. The key is that we need to have all of your equations in y equals mx plus b format. Reminder, m is what you are looking for. M is your slope. That's what you are comparing. Don't worry about anything else. So when you look here, your slope of this one is 5, your slope of this one is 5. If they have the same slopes, they are going to be parallel. Okay? So as you're looking at it, that one's pretty obvious. If you look below at number 3, they are not in y equals format yet. So what I'm going to do is I want to get it into y equals format. So I'm going to do this one fairly slowly, and hopefully this kind of jogs some memories. So we're going to get y by itself. So first thing that I want to do is I want to subtract x from each side. So I have 2y left on the left. And because I want to put it in this y equals mx plus b form, I'm going to put the x part first. Okay? Then I need to get rid of my 2. So I'm going to divide everything I see by 2. Now remember, this negative in front of the x means that that's really a -1. So we have y equals -1/2 x plus 1. If we look at the other equation, we're going to get y by itself. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 6x from each side. So I'm going to have negative 3y left on the left, negative 6x plus 21 on the right. Again, I want to put that x first because that's going to be the format that we're shooting for, that y equals mx plus b. Once we get to there, we're dividing everything by negative 3. And so you get an equation of y equals 2x minus 7. Now, from here, you're right back to what you did for example 1. We are just going to look at these two slopes, so negative 1/2 and positive 2. They are not the same, so they're not parallel, but they are opposite reciprocals, so they are perpendicular. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do number 7 together, and then I'm going to let you try out number 9 on your own. So number 7, again, you want to get it into that y equals mx plus b format. So I'm going to subtract 3x from each side. Notice I'm not combining the 3x and the 2. They're not like terms, so I cannot combine them. Divide everything by negative 1 to get the y to be positive. So we have y equals a positive 3x minus 2. Now, if we look here, we have a slope of 3 in this one. This is already in y equals mx plus b form, and that is a slope of 1/3. And now, when I'm looking at this, I want to ask myself, are those the same? Well, obviously they're not. Are they opposite reciprocals? They are not. And so your answer for this is that they are neither parallel nor perpendicular. Okay? So try out number 9, and let's see what we have. Okay, so when you look at this, again, this is already in y equals mx plus b form. We don't have to do anything else with that. So the first thing that I want to do on the right-hand side is I want to subtract 2x. And so at this point, I have 8y equals negative 2x plus 56. Now I want to divide everything by 8. So y equals, now, this is negative 2 over 8, but that will simplify. So make sure you simplify, because now when I look at my two slopes, I've got negative 1/4 and another negative 1/4, so therefore they are parallel. All right, the last one that I want to do with you guys today is this one, number 11. Okay, if I look at number 11, what I want to consider is, what do these lines look like? Okay, so the first one is y equals negative 7. So reminder, if y equals negative 7, that tells you it's crossing your y-axis at negative 7. Okay, so if it's y equals, it's crossing your y-axis. The other one, at x minus 2, tells you it's crossing your x-axis at 2. And so if it's crossing your x-axis, it's going to be a vertical line. So if you have a horizontal and a vertical, that forms a 90-degree angle, so therefore they are perpendicular. Spelling that funky, perpendicular. Okay, so in summary, if you have your points, you have to find your slope first by doing your rise over run that we did previously, then compare your slopes. If you're given equations, you have to get it into y equals mx plus b format first, and then compare your slopes or compare your m's to decide if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So as always, ask questions if you got them. Hopefully that's a little review of stuff you guys have already known. Thanks.